Hello, and welcome to Access for ELLs 2.0. This screencast is going to help you understand our annual English language proficiency assessment. So let's start off by talking about who takes Access. Any student who has been identified as an English learner will take WIDA's Access for ELLs 2.0. Most students will take the online version. A student may take the paper version as an accommodation, and a student may also take the alternate access. This alternate version of our assessment is for students with severe cognitive disabilities. In order to take the alternate access, an IEP team decision would need to be made using the decision tree. Our testing window for this year, 2019, begins on January 31st, and it will go until March 22nd. During Access for ELLs 2.0, your students will take 4 different domains: listening, reading, speaking, and writing. All English learners will take all 4 domains of Access. Each domain is administered in a separate test session in one day, unless there's an accommodation that would warrant the testing of a domain across multiple days. Access is administered in small groups, and speaking is completed individually or in very small groups when possible. Your students may test separately due to their levels of proficiency and other factors. So let's talk a little bit about why Access is so important. First of all, Access is given to help teachers and families understand each student's English language abilities. Access measures what students know and can do in English in the domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Teachers can use this information to make decisions about each student's education and how they can best assist students in learning. Students do not necessarily need to do anything to study for this assessment, but they should get a good night's sleep before each test session, and they should be encouraged to eat a good meal or a healthy snack before the test session. Students should also do something to relax before and after the test, and they should focus mostly on demonstrating their language abilities. When we talk about Access, we need to think about what does the administration of Access look like. First of all, students are going to be using laptops and headsets for both listening and speaking, but sometimes in the other domains they may choose to keep them on to help them focus and to block out any outside distraction. Students are going to take the 4 domains separately. Listening and reading come first, and those will help us determine the speaking and writing tiers of the test that they will take. Each domain is just as important as the others. This assessment is going to measure how well students use the English language in those domains. Access measures how well students use the English language, not only in English language arts, but also across the content areas. We look at the language of mathematics, the language of social studies, the language of science. Access does not evaluate how much content a student has learned, but rather looks at how they use the language of those content areas to show English proficiency in listening, reading, writing, and speaking. If content is presented in math, for example, solving the problem is not the goal of the question. The item is presented with language surrounding the content, and the students would be asked to demonstrate their understanding in that domain that they are being evaluated in. One of the questions we get asked very often are, what kind of questions are on the Access? What does it look like? So in this particular example, you're going to see a speaking domain for a grade 1 student in a tier BC. Tier A is for our lowest performing students, and tier BC is going to have more text and more information presented to the student. In this particular item, students are going to be listening to a narrator tell about a grocery store, about an interaction between Pablo and his dad at the grocery store. The narrator is going to present the information as students are looking at the pictures on the screen. And then students are going to be asked, why do Pablo and his dad need help? In each item presented, you will also hear Nina's response. Nina is our model student, and she provides the model exemplar to what a speaking response should look like. Students are then asked other questions, and they're given time to respond to each question. So let's listen to one example about the grocery store.
At the grocery store. Page 3. Let's talk about a story. Look at picture A. This boy's name is Pablo. Pablo and his dad are at the grocery store. Pablo wants to get some mangoes as a surprise for his grandmother. A mango is a kind of fruit. Mangoes are his grandmother's favorite fruit. Now, turn the page. Page 5. This is Ms. Kent. She works in the grocery store and helps people find the things they need. Now, turn the page. Page 7. Look at picture B. Ms. Kent helps Pablo and his dad find the fruits and vegetables. Pablo and his dad see bananas, apples, and pears, but they can't find any mangoes. His dad says, "I have an idea. Let's ask someone for help." Nina, tell me why Pablo and his dad need help.
Pablo and his dad need help because they can't find mangoes at the grocery store.
Number 1. Now it's your turn. Tell me about what you think will happen next in the story.
Students are now given time to respond.
Now, turn the page. Page 9. Now I will tell you the rest of the story about Pablo's visit to the grocery store. When I'm done, I will ask you to tell me the story.
This particular item goes on for quite a bit longer, where the narrator is finishing the story of Pablo and his father and continuing to ask questions of the student. The next question is written for a 4-5 grade band in speaking domain, also in the BC range. Students are going to listen to information about a project that kids are doing in school. The prompt will explain what the students need for the project and what the students want to find out in the experiment. The prompt will also explain the steps that the teacher takes to create the mixture, and then the students are presented with information about the experiment through data in a table. Nina, our model exemplar student, will be asked to make a hypothesis based on the information that she has learned. She will provide the model exemplar for what a speaking response should look like, and then students will be asked additional questions about the prompt. Students are asked to explain their own hypotheses. They can use the pictures and the information that they have been presented with to help them make their scientific prediction. I do just quickly want to point out before we listen to the prompt that the pictures that you see on your screen are not the actual pictures that a student would see within the textbook. Their pictures would reflect the question as it's progressing, including the materials that are being used in the experiment and some of the steps that the teacher is taking for the experiment. You can actually see samples of the test booklet as well. I'm going to provide you with the link in this presentation, but I just wanted you to know that the pictures here are just to represent rock candy in general, and they are not the actual pictures that the students would be using to help support their speaking response.
Page 3. Now we are going to talk about a science project. Mrs. Green's class is learning what happens when sugar dissolves in water. This picture shows the materials the class will use. The class needs 2 cups of water and 4 cups of sugar. They also need ice, a pot, jars, pencils, string, and a hot plate. The students want to see what will happen when they combine sugar with water at different temperatures. Now, turn the page. Page 5. First, Mrs. Green stirs half the sugar into ice-cold water and half the sugar into boiling hot water. She pours each sugar mixture into a separate jar. Now, turn the page. Page 7. Next, the students hang a screw tied to the middle of a pencil in each sugar mixture. They leave the jars untouched and observe the changes. Now, turn the page. Page 9. Look at day 1. In the cold water mixture, only a small amount of the sugar dissolved or mixed evenly with the water. Most of the sugar settled at the bottom of the jar. However, in the hot water mixture, the sugar completely dissolved in the water, creating a sugar-water solution. Now, turn the page. Page 11. Now look at day 10. In the cold water mixture, the ice melted. Some of the water evaporated, which means the water changed from a liquid into a gas. But the sugar remained at the bottom of the jar. In the hot water mixture, about half of the water evaporated. The sugar has started to form solid sugar crystals around the screw and the string. Now, turn the page. Page 13. Nina, make a hypothesis or a scientific prediction about what you think will happen to the cold water mixture by day 24.
My hypothesis is that more of the water will evaporate from the jar by day 24, but the sugar will still be at the bottom.
Now, turn the page. Page 15. Now it's your turn. In a moment, I will ask you to make a hypothesis or a scientific prediction about what you think will happen to the hot water mixture by day 24. Think about it.
So as you can see, the level of language that is presented in this particular question is much higher than at the previous level. Students are being given information about the content. They defined the word hypotheses using the word scientific prediction, and they presented the information through pictures, through the narrator telling the story, and then also through data tables and charts, which I know you can't see. But the students are supported visually and auditorily, and then they're being given the exemplar from Nina to know what is expected of them in a speaking response, and then they're asked questions. I've provided some links where you can actually go on and look at additional sample items across grade level bands all the way up through high school. The sample speaking prompts are available there in the link that you see, and you can also find sample test items as well as the paper booklets that would have the images and charts and visuals that we referred to that you're hearing about in the prompts. So you'd be able to see those as well. Just to give you one more additional type of question that you might see on Access. In this particular prompt, Raymond's class is learning about something being more dense than water. If something is more dense than water, then it will sink. And if something is less dense than water, it will float. The prompt explains that the density of water is 1 gram per cubic centimeter. So within the prompt, they would actually provide quite a bit of information about density, so a student would not necessarily have to know about density coming into this particular question. They would also then use examples. So if the density of coal is more than 1 gram per cubic centimeter, and the density of a wax crayon is less than 1 gram per cubic centimeter, they want you to choose the picture that would show what will happen when the two objects are placed in the beaker of water. So in this particular prompt, students are asked to choose the picture that shows the answer to the question. They do not have to know or remember this concept prior to the test, and they are given the information that they need within the task itself. Students do have to listen and prove that they understand the idea that they have been presented with, and they would have to make a hypothesis based on the description. After this question, students would be presented with more information on this subject, and they'd be then asked to compare and contrast relationships as well as show proof or disproof of the hypothesis. The information is presented orally, but students will also see text and charts and images which will help them to process the information. Students will choose their answer from pictures, so reading is not necessary as part of the listening domain. Often we are asked how Access is different from other assessments, reading assessments that you might take in a classroom or things like a Smarter Balanced type of test. So the reading section of the language proficiency assessment will help to determine how well students can process academic language that is found in written text. It looks at things like linguistic complexity, language forms and conventions, and also usage of vocabulary. Where other reading assessments will measure strategies such as summarizing, decoding, predicting, even comprehension and fluency. Access is looking to see how students use linguistic complexity. What does their discourse look like? What amount of speech are they using? And what is the structure of that speech? Are they coherent in their ideas? And then can they use a variety of different sentence types? When we look at language forms and conventions, we look at the sentence level. So we look at the mechanics of the way the sentence is formed. We also look at the fluency of expression. And are we matching language to match the purpose? In the vocabulary usage, the word or phrase level, we not only have general and specific vocabulary words, but we're also looking for technical language that has been presented in the prompt. So language related to that content area. Also looking to see, can students use multiple meanings of words and phrases and different shades of meaning? So speak and writing are the productive domains, and they are assessing the linguistic complexity, thinking about the quantity of sentences and also the variety. What does the amount look like? Are students simply saying, I see a dog? Or are they using a more complex sentence structure? Also, what kind of coherence and cohesion do they have with their ideas? Is it very choppy, or does it sound like they are telling a story based on the information that they have been presented with, and it has a coherence about it? Also, do they use a variety of sentence types to help them form an organized text, or is it simply every sentence sounds exactly the same? We look at language forms and conventions for the way we use our language structures, and we're looking to see, what does their fluency of expression sound like? Also, are we matching our language forms to the perspective or to the type of text that we are responding to? When we talk about vocabulary usage, are we using that general, specific, or technical language? And are students thinking about multiple meanings and shades of meanings? In the listening domain, we measure how well a student can listen to someone speaking in English and how they can answer questions based on what they've heard. The listening domain takes about 30 to 45 minutes to administer. Students can only listen to each test one time, and the items cannot be repeated unless it's pre-selected as an accommodation for their IEP or their 504. So students have to listen carefully the first time, and when students click Next to move on, their answer cannot be changed. The reading domain will take about 30 to 35 minutes to administer, and again, once students click Next, they cannot go back to change an item. Students will use their headphones to listen to instructions, but after that, they don't necessarily need them, but they can keep them on if it helps them to assist with focusing and block out some of that background noise. If students cannot read something on the test, they must simply try their best. They must pick an answer choice to be able to move on. In this particular assessment, there are no read aloud or text-to-speech accommodations because it's not measuring summarizing and comprehension, and it's really looking at the information. How do they understand the English language as it has been presented in text? Our speaking domain measures a student's ability to speak clearly about a given topic. So students are encouraged to actually think before they hit the record button. They should hit record only when they are confident and they know what they want to say. Students should give as much of a response as they can, and they should demonstrate their vocabulary and their ability to connect ideas. Students should not hit stop until they are finished responding because they cannot go back or they cannot add more once they hit stop. Students will listen to Nina for an example of that model response, that exemplar. And students should be reminded to speak up loud and clear. In this particular example, we're looking to see what kind of description has better detail, which response would have a more effective sentence construction, a variety of sentence lengths, and a more fluent discourse. Some of our students may say, simply, I see a bus, I see a girl. They are not inaccurate. That information is correct. There is a bus and there is a girl. But we are looking for more complexity than that. In this particular example, I see a girl getting on a bus. She has a backpack. She is going to school. So now we have a little bit more information about the picture, but we still really don't have that variety of sentence lengths or the constructions of sentences that we're looking for that shows us a more fluent discourse. I see a girl getting on a bus. She must be going to school, but she looks scared. Her mother is trying to comfort her and make her feel better. So in that final example, you can see that the complexity of the sentences, a variety of the sentence lengths, and there's also a much more fluent discourse using vocabulary like scared and comfort. The writing domain is typically completed last, although not always, and this domain takes up to an hour to administer. So the listening and reading domains are receptive, meaning they're assessing what a student understands, and those are given first. These will help determine what our students will receive for speaking and writing tiers. The expressive domains, where students are actually responding and producing language. Writing for grades 1 to 3 will be in a paper booklet with a test administrator who uses a script to build up the prompt. The test contains some pre-writing activities and some brainstorming. In grades 4 to 5, students will be given the test over the computer, and students will type in their response. They will still be given the pre-writing and the brainstorming activities, but those are built into the computer system. Some of the benefits of using the online access platform is increased student engagement. Right? It standardizes the test-taking experience and it gets our students involved with the prompts. There are built-in accommodation and accessibility features that are appropriate for individual student needs, things like a highlighter or an underline line guide. There's increased ease for test administrators because listening and reading are scored automatically, and those will help determine the tiers for speaking and writing. There's also a greater flexibility, being able to administer multiple grades and proficiency levels simultaneously, where in the past, if you were reading from a paper book, you would have to give a specific grade level and a specific tier apart from any other. Listening and reading domains are scored automatically by the computer, and speaking and writing scores are scored by Data Recognition Corporation, the DRC. Each student will receive an individual score report indicating their English proficiency levels in each of the domains, and they also get a composite score in oral language, literacy, comprehension, and then an overall composite. The scores for Access can be used to help us monitor student progress on an annual basis, to look at how students are progressing in terms of their English language proficiency. It can also establish when an English learner has attained the English language proficiency according to our state criteria. They can help inform our classroom instruction and assessment, especially when we look individually at those domains, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And they can help aid us in decision-making surrounding students. So as testing begins, we would ask you to please keep in mind that testing all of our English learners 4 times each for the 4 different domains takes time, and we're asking for your patience. Please remember that this assessment is very important. Students must put forth their best effort, and they must showcase what they can do. Students are going to need your support and your encouragement. Keep in mind that during our testing, regular group schedules will not be the same. So please do not let students come to the classroom door, as this disturbs our testing. Sometimes it's possible a test session could take longer than anticipated. So we're asking for you to please wait till you hear from me before sending your students for their test. Also, please support our quiet testing environment by having your class remain silent in the hallways. Please also keep in mind that your test administrators will do whatever they can to schedule testing sessions at the most convenient times. But due to the number of students that must be tested, 4 times each, and based on the needs of your individual students, the testing time may not be your ideal time. So please be patient and flexible. If you have any concerns, please feel free to reach out via email. And if you need us immediately, you can text us on our cell phone rather than calling the testing room or using the office paging system. When our testing in progress sign is on the door, please do not disturb us. Students only have 1 opportunity to hear a question and only 1 chance to formulate their response. So if they miss it because they are interrupted, there's nothing that we can do. It will affect the outcome of their test. Please remember to keep calm and test on. It will all be over soon.